Hello, and thank you for joining us on another episode of In Other News. My name's Kurt Maida, and on my panel is the esteemed Erica Adamson and the wise Gabe Salazar, both very astute political analysts and writers. So we're going to be talking about some subjects today that we ended with on the last show, specifically on trends. And the first one, we're going to start with Erica's trending prediction about the New York City Democratic primary. What happened in New York, guys?
Well, I'm just going to be honest. I didn't expect that we were going to be able to do an entire segment about this. I think it's safe to say that the outcome of the New York City Democratic mayoral primary was unexpectedly decisive. For months, Andrew Cuomo had been the front runner in this primary, all but assumed to win, and then at the very last minute, Zohran Mamdani, a 33-year-old Democratic socialist, won this primary with a 12-point margin.
I mean, no one was expecting that, you know?
None of you were.
No. I mean, I can remember. I mean, it was exactly a month ago, and my impression was this could be a rising star in the Democratic Party, but that his time had not come yet. You know, that maybe this is a name that we'll remember, or who knows? Maybe it's a name that we'll forget. You know, because Cuomo had all the money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a significant amount of money. I think President Clinton endorsed him, as well as a lot of the Democratic, the big names in the party.
Right, the old guard.
Right, the old guard, right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's different? What happened?
Well, I think the major perception, I think there's a few points we agreed on. One, his campaign was done in a way that appealed to a lot of younger generations. It was led with this digital movement. So in that front, he was at least more accessible and a lot more well known, at least within the younger generation.
Right.
Second, his policies, very different from what Cuomo and the current Mayor Adams have stood for. Adams, I think his campaign is promising public safety. That's been his campaign mantra since 2021 when he was elected.
It hasn't really, from what I know, and I do visit New York City for pleasure and for work on occasion, and that has not been a strong point advantage for him, because there have been significant issues with respect to safety. And here you had this, this tough cop who was running the city, and they still had to call out the state guard. They've had to hire thousands and thousands of police officers, and things are still not working. So it makes you think maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's something else fundamentally wrong. I mean, can we talk a little bit about Mr. Zohrani himself? Like, what's his appeal?
Right. Well, first, I think,
and a little bit about him.
He is a younger candidate, right? As Erica mentioned, he's. I guess he has that energy. He has that offensive outlook. Not to offend, so to speak, but he is more on the attack, I want to say.
Yeah.
He is willing to, step up to the plate. He's willing to call out the other leaders of the Democratic Party. He's willing to call out what he feels to be inadequacies within the current administration of New York City. So he does have that fighter spirit.
Yeah, but I would add to that also that he's not just a fighter, he's a listener. I mean, one of his earliest viral moments was right after President Trump was elected in 2024, and he went on a street corner in the Bronx and had a microphone. And now, for context, New York City was the largest shift towards Trump. I think 11 points more in favor of Trump.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, the city did go that way.
Yeah, so he went to a street corner in the Bronx, and he started asking people why they backed Trump, and tried to figure out why Democrats lost all these voters. And he said, if there was a candidate talking about freezing the rent, making buses free, making universal childcare a reality, are those things that you would support? So I thought that was really interesting. That was an early viral moment. While other people were kind of trading theories about what went wrong, he was actually asking the voters directly.
That's interesting. I'm not aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I know, after the presidential election, there was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going around, you know, in media, in terms of even some of the higher ups in the Democratic Party, and even the Republicans weighed in as to what the Democrats were doing wrong. You know, and I think a lot of times the conversation always drifted to the social positions that Democrats had. You know, things like LGBTQ rights, their views on, you know, transgendered persons involved in women's sports. And then, then usual, you know, thoughts about, you know, Second Amendment, you know, the ownership of guns, and COVID vaccines, whereas, you know, some of these bread and butter issues that, you know, we know as like affordability,
absolutely,
they were kind of, you know, brushed aside.
And that was his conclusion of this, I guess, street interview that he was doing, his early viral moment. I was listening to an NPR interview that he did very recently, Mr. Mamdani, and he said that voters told him again and again that they voted for Trump because they remembered being able to afford their life better 4 years ago than they currently could. And he said that voters told him that they could be brought back with a focus on an economic agenda.
Right. So, I mean, can we jump in and talk a little bit about his economic agenda? I mean, some of the things that I recall, and you guys can jump in and add things. You know, he's talking about free bus fare for people. A big one is rent stabilization. And, you know, honestly, it's New York City is the most expensive city in our country. And it's extremely difficult for, you know, working families and even single people that are out looking for their first jobs to even live in that city. There's other things he talked about for working families, which I think may have resonated, which was free childcare up to the age, I believe of 6 for children, which, you know, for working mothers, for, you know, young families in general. I mean, I think that's a huge cost that's, you know, borne by private individuals. You know, you don't have insurance for that.
Right.
That comes right out of your pocket, and oftentimes, I know. I've known for, you know, when some of my friends were younger, there were conversations, you know, that couples had as to maybe one of the two, which usually turned out to be the woman in the couple, but one out of the two possibly not working and putting their work life on hold, career on hold, until the children were of an age, you know, when they can enter school.
Right.
So, I mean, we're talking about huge sacrifices to save money towards not having to, you know, contribute towards childcare.
Right.
So this is kind of a dynamic plan that he's, you know, advocating.
Right.
I mean, any other issues that you know stand out in terms of what he's talking about? I know he's talked about increasing the taxes on people that earn over $1 million, as well as hitting up some of the corporations, many of whom that are centered in New York City. What else are people scared of? You know, or people think, you know, he's going to do that's going to disrupt society.
Right. I mean, a lot of the backlash against Mamdani from Adams, from Cuomo, and from Silva, the Republican primary candidate, have been that his ideas are, again, too pie in the sky, too unrealistic. New York is never going to be able to afford this.
Right.
But I think each of those programs and their policy implication are going to lead to working class people being able to afford that. And when you contribute working class people paying their taxes, you keep the system running, you keep it going.
Right.
So mothers being able to have childcare means they can go to the office without having to worry about, you know, their kids being taken care of. Same thing with the bus fare. I mean, just the transportation, accessibility is going to unleash this burden of transportation to tons of New Yorkers. So it is something that I think is towards the advantage of keeping New York away from this two-tiered class system and bringing in a greater inclusivity to working class citizens, the way this used to be. Right. So I think that's kind of the, again, to kind of retort on to what his critics have been saying. I think on the contrary, they are more realistic when it comes to building a better New York for everyone.
And the young people I've spoken with, I mean, they're very concerned about the fact that New York City, as well as a lot of other cities and maybe even American society, you know, it's going back to this time, you know, in the late 1800s that was known as the Gilded Age, where you really have a stark contrast between the haves and the have-nots. Right. So you have back then you had the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the the Astors, right, the robber barons. Now replace those names with Bezos, Musk, right. Gates, where their influence on the city has been really to kind of push out people that were not of just extraordinary wealth. We're not even talking about professionals or people of means, but extraordinary wealth that young people simply cannot compete with.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So based on this, will he get the support of the Democratic Party to do these things?
As far as being the leader of New York, it is looking towards that way. I think we can sort of discuss his polls in comparison to the other candidates. He is leading in New York by a very large margin.
I saw he
Adams
had
is
40
terrible.
points versus, I don't remember if it was Cuomo or Adams was at 22, but that was, whoever that was in second.
Right.
Those numbers are huge.
Yeah,
Right.
He's doing very well amongst those polling figures.
Right.
So it would be very counterintuitive for the Democratic Party to just reject this. But again, we've seen, kind of learning from history, we've seen this happen with Bernie's presidential campaign. And so the question is, are they willing to sacrifice a little bit of that old guard democratic traditionalism and bring in these new leaders like Mamdani?
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of prominent Democrats have not endorsed Mamdani.
So why do you think that is, Erica? Yeah. Is it the policies, or is it the person himself, or?
It's hard to say. I think it's both. I know that a lot of prominent Democrats don't agree with his stance on the war in Gaza. I know a lot of them have issues with his plans for how he's going to pay for his reforms that he wants to put in place. I know the governor, Kathy Hochul, says that she is opposed to raising the corporate tax rate and opposed to increasing the income taxes on the top 1%. Which are his two ways of funding all of these policies.
Right.
But he's going to have to get that approval from Albany in order to enact those reforms.
Sure. Right.
At least the financial ones.
Yeah. It's funny. It sounds like, if you didn't mention Kathy Hochul's name as well as a couple of other people's names, I would have thought, you were kind of reciting the Republican response against him in terms of not taxing the 1%, not taxing corporations, and you're obviously, you're talking about, a Democratic governor of that state, being against, these propositions, which could potentially have, a real significant impact on the lives of working people in that city. How would, assuming that he does prevail in the election itself, the final election, do you think that Democrats, and again, this is opinion, will rally around him?
I think they'll have to. And I was actually reading this article that I have on me right now from yesterday about Hochul and Mamdani. They'd met after the Pride March on June 29th and, quote, discussed the affordability crisis in areas of common ground on lowering costs. That's according to someone on the governor's team who declined to be named in order to discuss this meeting.
Sure.
And it sounds like, at least for now, they're actually on fairly peaceful terms.
Yeah.
Now, I believe the governor will be running for re-election or beginning her re-election campaign.
Right.
So there'll be a lot of pressure from the left in order for her to at least make some concessions. But at the same time, of course, she's going to have to allow, or at least Albany's going to have to allow, these, I guess, financial changes. So they both kind of are depending on each other in a way and need to have some sort of common ground for both their interests to be realized.
Right.
So let's talk about the upcoming election then. Since he is the Democratic nominee, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was quite cordial and did congratulate Mamdani, on primary day.
Right.
Decided, in the last few days that he does indeed want to run, however.
Right.
He's going to run as an independent. The current mayor of the city, Eric Adams, is also going to be running as an independent. He declared his independent candidacy right from the get-go. He didn't bother with the, with the primary, which may have been a good decision for him. So, whereas Cuomo was resoundingly defeated by Mamdani, and now Adams has actually used that as an attack line on Cuomo and asked him to step down and not run, not step down, but not run, because he'd already contested an election, so to speak, with Mamdani, and clearly lost by a fairly wide margin.
Yeah.
So I mean, the other part of this conversation, aside from affordability, would the results have been different if you did not have two candidates, who were, and we're not even going to get to the Republican part yet, but that were deeply flawed. I mean, former Governor Cuomo had there were numerous allegations of sexual assault and harassment during the tail end of his office in the governor's mansion. And then, of course, Adams had a corruption scandal, and where he had to essentially ingratiate himself to the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to basically give him a lifeline to potentially avoid jail, or at least significant fines. So, I mean, we have, two pretty flawed candidates. Would it have been different if the people that the Democratic Party put up, were a little,
Cleaner.
maybe cleaner?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the word. I mean, there'd been talk where, there's 8 million people in that city,
Right.
and this was the best they had. Someone who was, alleged to have committed sexual assault
Right.
on numerous women, and someone who was, undergoing a corruption
Right.
investigation at the federal level.
Right.
So, I mean,
So yeah, I mean, as far as those features are, I mean, they're pretty jarring. I agree. I think the polls are pretty representative of the fact that New Yorkers are not supporting these people in
Right.
large swaths.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the Democrats also failed to put up someone who did show at least a more cleaner image, someone who, if they wanted an old traditional Democrat,
Right.
where was the support?
Yeah.
So really, I think Mamdani's campaign is really showing that trend of getting away from the Democratic old guard.
Right.
Let's bring in new ideas. Let's bring in a new candidate. And he, again, Mamdani is not aligning himself with any of the old guard, so to speak.
no, clearly not.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Clearly
I
not.
think that it takes courage, it takes a lot of guts to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that is also itself a sign of his good leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
He's willing to step up and to say things that are not in line with just traditional party policies.
Right.
So I think they can see that, they respect it, and it's shown results. I mean, the Bernie AOC oligarchy tour has shown results.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Senator Sanders, our senator here in Vermont,
Right.
did endorse him. About when did he do that?
I think
approximately?
right before we recorded the show.
Right. Okay. Right. It was fairly recent.
It was very
right before
last
the
minute.
show.
I believe
Yeah.
that early voting had already started. It might
Yeah.
even have been almost over at that point.
Okay.
AOC endorsed, I believe, a week or two before that.
Right.
So it was very
right.
last minute. I think a lot of people were starting to wonder, are they going to endorse him?
Yeah.
I think it helped with his momentum, just how last minute it was.
Right.
But it was very last minute.
Well, I mean, AOC and Senator Sanders have been, going around the country on this kind of barnstorming tour, talking about these affordability issues. I think very similar to what Mr. Mamdani, has been referring to, as well as a lot of other, new upstart Democratic candidates who are younger, talking about, that the country's become very challenging for people, to be able to pay. Pay taxes as well as pay for health care, pay for child care, pay for, investing in their future.
Right.
Social Security's up, it's a question mark, even for my generation, let alone, yours, whether that's going to still be around. And I think there's a lot of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, it's ironic that they then elected a billionaire in November to solve the problems. But I think there was what Eric had mentioned that maybe reminiscing of pre-pandemic America, and that things were maybe a little bit more affordable. The inflation rate wasn't as high as it was, a few years ago.
Right.
So they gave President Trump a second chance, so to speak. But I think there's been frustration based on what we're seeing. We're seeing all the billionaires being courted by both parties. So I don't want to just say that it's simply the Republicans. It's not just the the Musk being courted at the White House. One thing that struck me recently was watching, and again, I'm sure they're wonderful people, so I'm not knocking them individually, but Secretary, Hillary Clinton's chief of staff person, top assistant, Huma Abedin, formerly Anthony Weiner's wife, who married George Soros' son. And again, it was this gathering of all these billionaires in a very exclusive area, and you have the top, people in the Democratic Party showing up to this, couple's second wedding, essentially. And I don't know what kind of taste that gave to people that are struggling, where you see both sides seem to be, courting to, billionaires. And I think that's a real challenge, and I think that's where someone like Mamdani and similar people, can certainly exploit that. And it's something that Bernie Sanders and AOC have been talking about and been quite successful around the country, right. Espousing that message. I mean, so what would it take to defeat him? Mamdani, yeah.
First of all, one or two of the candidates needs to drop out. Cuomo, like we said, just announced about 2 days ago that he is going to run as an independent. He said only 13% of New Yorkers voted in the primary, and he said offering slick slogans but no real solutions is what Mamdani's been doing.
Okay.
And he says that's not what people really want.
Right.
Now, as it stands, they're going to split the vote, the anti-Mamdani vote, because there's too many of them. But if Adams or if Cuomo drops out, then there's a viable challenge.
Right, right.
I wouldn't be surprised if all of them continue to campaign until pretty last minute, like the last month or so. And Cuomo did say, I believe, that he would withdraw if Adams turned out to be the stronger candidate. I think he called on Adams to do the same.
Right.
I don't
think Adams responded in
Yes,
kind.
he didn't. But as of right now, as of where things currently stand, there's going to be a split vote.
Right.
So that's one major factor.
Yeah.
How many challengers he has.
Right. There's also a question about money. I mean, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that there's a war chest being basically created to fund someone to defeat this man. I think there's already been $20 million that have been put in, and I'm sure that number is going to grow quite a bit, given the fact that we're talking about New York City.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is going to try to counteract the success that Mamdani has experienced with younger people in New York, and some of these messages to possibly try to derail, his campaign. I mean, you have to think, now I understand that number one, it's New York City. Number two, it's the city where the President of the United States comes from and was actually born in. But the President felt that he had to make a statement following a primary victory. We're not even talking about the election, but a primary victory. And he's done the President's actually said everything, including that he's talking about potentially denaturalizing and deporting Mamdani back to Uganda. And he's also used other disparaging terms, calling him a lunatic communist. But the president's not unique in making some of these claims. I've seen journalists in very high-end newspapers, esteemed newspapers, basically calling him a communist and talking about making creating these metaphors of the old Soviet Union and bread lines in New York City if this man were to prevail in the overall election. Right. The president of the United States has also talked about federalizing New York City in the event Mamdani would be victorious in the election. So I mean, these are some pretty strong words, against someone who's not espoused violence and won fair and square according to the system that's in place. Right. So I mean, will that have an impact on his candidacy? Will that create any scares in terms of the voting population?
It may. I mean, I think every voter would want to have that security in their preferred candidates. That being said, I mean, would the alternatives be any better to New Yorkers, right? Ending up with either Adams or Cuomo. I think that the Mamdani is certainly a figure within the Trump administration that they're keeping their eyes on him. Yeah. And I think that, given the implication of what could happen in a post-Mamdani New York City, they would be pretty foolish to just let it slide by. So I think they will put up some resistance. Yeah. But overall, if New York stands with Mamdani, I don't think they have anything to fear.
Right. Right. I mean, is there any chance that that the Republican candidate could potentially, defeat him?
He's been running for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, let's just briefly talk about the fact that again, the city of New York is it primarily votes Democrat. There have been some prominent Republican mayors in the last 20 years. If you think about Rudolph Giuliani as well as Michael Bloomberg, who had, by many means, on many accounts, what you would call an okay or successful administrations. However, so Curtis Sliwa, a little bit about him. He started the Guardian Angels back in the late 1970s in response to increasing crime on the streets of New York City, where the police didn't have the resources they claimed that they needed in order to combat crime effectively. So Mr. Sliwa, that's part of his history. And as Erica mentioned, he has run for mayor, and he was the last person who actually ran against Mayor Adams currently, the current mayor of New York, and was soundly defeated by something like 60 points in the election. So that's the person essentially that the Republicans are putting up to run against Mamdani. So it doesn't appear, based on Mr. Sliwa's record in the past, having run and having lost, in various elections, he doesn't have the support of the old guard of the Republican Party. He's had, a lot of strong words to use against the President of the United States, so they're not on good terms with one another. So, I mean, predictions here. What do you guys think? I mean, is Mamdani going to take it?
I think they're going to make it hard for him, but
yeah.
I felt optimistic in the primary, and I still feel optimistic now.
Right.
I know Bernie posted something, Senator Sanders, the other day about how the billionaires are going to put all their resources and all their efforts to block Mamdani from winning, and I would agree with that.
Right.
We've said that already, but
I would have said before we shared the news about him, I didn't really know about this candidate.
Well, he was at 1% in the polls until very recently.
So I think the winds are changing towards his direction. They're very favorable to him right now.
Yeah.
He just has to keep the momentum up, and I think he has a very good shot.
Out of curiosity, when did you guys first hear about Mamdani?
Online, on social media.
Was there any individual viral moment? He's a lot of those.
Yeah, he has a few, especially during the debate. He did have that primary debate where I believe they asked him, would he be comfortable as mayor of New York City visiting Israel? So I believe he was the only one to dissent on that question.
Hadn't they asked, what foreign country you would visit if you were the mayor of New York. And he said something along the lines of, well, I would be the mayor of New York. My focus would be on the city.
Right.
Right. You know, which was, you know, fair enough as an answer. I mean, you know, given the fact that, yeah, this is a city. It's not, you know,
Yeah.
he's not a member of the State Department. Right.
Yep.
He's not a representative of the United States. The other thing that I'm wondering is what does this mean for the Democratic Party? Forget about New York City, you know, because we've had obviously the president's commented about him extensively, but so have, you know, people that are the higher ups, the old guard, as you call them, Gabe,
right,
in the Democratic Party. Will some of his views that Mamdani's expressed, will some of those views have to be infused within the platform of the party? I mean, so let me give you specifics. So he obviously has a different point of view than most mayors in the past have had, and most politicians in general in the United States, about the conflict in, you know, in Israel and Palestine region of the world. And he's been quite vocal about it. And he's caught a lot of flack because of that by his, you know, not just his adversaries, but people within his own party that are questioning, you know, whether or not he is a viable candidate or someone that they would vote for. So does the Democratic Party need to change their views about democratic socialism, about our country's relationship with the State of Israel? What does that mean?
Absolutely. I think point being taken, whether you call it socialism, whether you just want to call it equitable social policies, things need to change, and I think people are more cognizant of that than they have ever been. The list of issues that we mentioned earlier on, talking about these policies, people are just finding it much more difficult. Inflation is up, college tuition is up, so childcare is basically unaffordable. Healthcare is non-existent in this country in a public sense.
Right.
So what are the options that are, you know, elected leaders proposing? So far, I mean, Mamdani is running under this platform of change, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. Whether you want to call it deviating from the old guard of democratic institutions, what are they proposing that's been different?
And change is always attractive. I mean, you guys were younger at the time, but you know that was Obama's big term that he put out there, you know, and trying to move away from the status quo, which it seems that, you know, the Democratic Party as a whole are kind of stuck in this phase where they're still Monday morning quarterbacking from the election, trying to figure out a direction to go to.
We were talking, sorry,
go
I
ahead.
didn't cut you off. We were talking about this yesterday, though. How President Trump is not afraid to break the rules. He's not afraid to pursue policies that might have seemed outlandish a year ago, and he's not afraid to give his base what he wants. And I think that's the big difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party right now. I'm not saying any of these policies that he's been pursuing are good, at least in my view, but he delivers. He delivers what his base asks for, and I don't really think that's been something that Democrats have been doing successfully lately.
It seems like Americans, you know, regardless of what their particular, you know, angle is or orientation is, politically speaking, they like bold action. Right? And I think that's what, for a lot of President Trump's supporters, what they like to see is that bold action being carried forth and ending up in results, whether that means, you know, removing, undocumented immigrants or, ending, Roe v. Wade.
Right.
I mean, these were things that, were talked about and tossed around as possibilities, and they always got cheers at, CPAC and other conservative, public functions, but I don't think most people thought these things were actually ever going to happen. I know for a fact, I think a lot of Democrats didn't think something like Roe v. Wade would be overturned.
Right.
So maybe there was a certain complacence on the part of Democrats thinking, well, this is established law, that's not going to change, and Obamacare, that's not going to go away, and these different things that the
Right,
country's
these
taken for
long-standing-
granted. Yeah, they're
right.
being chipped
Yeah.
away.
Right, and again, that's I think part of the issue is like we've had so much advancement, at least in the 30s. Maybe all these old institutions, Medicare, Social Security, they've been with us for a while, and I don't feel like they've grown. They've just maintained themselves. So I mean, the trend since maybe the 70s has just been to keep the law, don't change it, don't evolve it. And that really, since this administration, we've now seen a regress of those kinds of expansions, trying to
Right.
take away from what there used to be.
But these were
And
all
the Democrats
classic.
are not responding in time.
Yeah,
They're
these were all
just-
classic Republican ideals, so it's not like, they're coming from nowhere. They were always talked about.
Right.
But it never seemed like, they ever came to be until President Trump came in, until the president came in and showed people bold action, and I think a lot of his supporters, eat that up. Right. And I think, the Democrats, for in large part, have been unable to replicate that with respect to progressive issues
Yeah.
and things that they, otherwise champion.
And I think the whole this is not realistic, this is not feasible critiques against Mamdani, like, I think people were just getting tired of them. We've been saying that for years, and no one says that to Trump.
Right.
Right. Well, I remember when
No one
Senator
says he's thinking
Sanders,
too bold. Yeah.
when Senator Sanders ran, for the first time against Hillary Clinton and then again in 2020, there was the most common refrain I recall was that he's a dreamer, these things can't happen. Even though they happen in many countries that we have very good relationships with, in Europe and Canada to the north, I had good relationship with,
Right.
right. But I mean, so these things have happened in countries and societies that are very much like ours.
Exactly.
But the assumption was, it can't happen. So I think similarly, I think Mamdani's probably going to get that also.
Yeah.
Similar to what Bernie Sanders faced when he ran.
Yeah.
That there wasn't any reality.
Right.
Talking about things like free college tuition and other things that could really make a change in people's lives.
Right. Right. I mean, this administration, the presidential administration, has shown a lot of seeds of chaos. There's a lot of responses from the Democrats. I think just being unable to unify in the same way that Republicans have, within party lines, it seems like they're growing very unanimous in how they vote. I mean, the passage of this big, beautiful bill was another kind of element of that. Where the Democrats kind of falter, I think, is they have this split between the older and the newer, and they just are not able to agree enough to really pass that. I mean, even given the administration majority in the Biden administration, back when there was a full Congress dealing with Democrat majorities, where was the opportunity for change during that time? I mean, they had it in their hands.
No, certainly, yeah, with a more balanced, Supreme Court at that time, also, right?
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's showing. I think the sign of the times is that things are changing very rapidly, and the response from the Democrats has to be to change just as fast,
right?
And to kind of respond with what is going on.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's early, and he hasn't even been elected mayor or yet,
Right.
or the election hasn't happened. Do you think a successful run on his part in prevailing will actually inspire others to run that are similarly like-minded?
Absolutely, and I hope it continues. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Deja Fox,
Right.
The candidate from Arizona, very also progressive. Also, I think with the seal of approval from the Bernie AOC team.
Right.
And so, I mean, as long as people are willing to take that courageous step forward, run on these progressive policies, I think the change is viable. It will happen.
But they're also doing something different. I mean, in terms of capitalizing on social media, you have campaigns being built on TikTok and knocking on doors, which is very different than, I think, the old guard of the Democratic Party in terms of their views, which may have been on the cutting edge when some of these people first got involved in politics, but these things are rapidly changing.
Right.
So now it seems somewhat dated. I mean, did social media have a big role in this in terms of Mamdani's victory in the primary? And is that something that you're seeing?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you compare the turnout for the Democratic mayoral primary in 2021 versus in 2025. I believe per the New York Times, 37,000 people registered to vote in the 2 weeks before the deadline versus 3,000 in 2021. And the turnout was very young compared to last time. And I've been referencing a lot these viral moments that Mamdani has had. One in particular, during the debate, I believe, when Cuomo said that, his inexperience is dangerous, and now you have Donald Trump on all of that. And that's when Mr. Mamdani says to Mr. Cuomo, I've never had to resign in disgrace, I've never cut Medicaid, I've never stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. He goes on and on. Never hounded the 13 women who credibly accused me of sexual harassment. And saying, I've never done these things because I am not you, Mr. Cuomo. And furthermore, the name is Mamdani, and he spells it out. I don't know if you've seen that video. I'm sure most people have seen that at this point.
Yeah.
But also, one viral moment that I remember was when he said, I'm going to say something that no politician's ever asked, stop sending us money. That's actually the first thing I saw of his.
Yeah.
That was when he hit the fundraising deadline. Yes,
right?
he hit the fundraising deadline.
Yeah.
He had a lot of young people, a lot of young volunteers. And it was the young people who brought him to victory. So it's really hard to say that the viral moments weren't a major part of that.
Yeah. I saw a couple of instances where paid canvassers from the Cuomo campaign were actually openly, expressing their support for Mamdani.
And then he would post the pictures of it, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Those went viral.
Yeah. But they were paid by the Cuomo campaign to go out and canvass,
Yeah.
But their point of view, however, regarding, issues of affordability, issues, that they agreed with, maybe socially, were more in line with Mamdani's, campaign.
Yeah.
Right.
Just the other day when Cuomo announced that he was going to stay in the race and run as an independent, he posted this video online on Twitter, or X, I guess you're supposed to call it.
Right.
Twitter. He got around 6,000 likes, I think, and then Mr. Mamdani replied to this tweet with a link to his donation site.
Yeah.
And got around 160,000.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's also been one of the biggest criticisms that Bernie's had as well about campaign finance issues.
Of course.
Right. Again, we don't want to have the same issues going with the Democratic old guard like we've had with billionaire influence,
Yeah.
keeping policies from being passed just because it benefits the elites.
Right.
We want to have something that will change. And I think doing this campaign affecting working class people who
Yeah.
don't have billions to throw around,
Sure.
Yeah.
is really going to be one of the key features about him and also any other progressive candidate who wants to proceed.
Yeah, it remains to be
ran
seen.
like that.
There's a fairly progressive mayor in Boston, Michelle Wu, who Mamdani actually credits quite a bit in terms of her approach to governing a large city, and she's been quite popular despite having these these very progressive views and policies on governing a large city, multi-ethnic city like that. And I wonder, what does Mamdani have to deliver in order to be deemed a success? I mean,
Well, I think, as with any politician, it's
Yeah.
always a little bit historical, retrospective analysis. We won't really see until we see what he delivers as far as the people in New York, how their lives are being improved. I think that's the best way to assess that.
okay, I'm going to cut you off really quick. Predictions about other things, trends, things that you're following, political or otherwise.
Political or otherwise.
Right.
I've been on Sunday I started reading, we cut it out really quickly, the memoir by Serge Tankian of System of a Down, Down with the System. I'm 50 pages into it, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm trying to make these guys read it as well. But it goes into a lot of the politics of his music and his background. It's been a really good read so far.
Okay, Gabe.
Nice. As far as predictions go, I can't really speak on the future, but just following legal trends, seeing what's happening around. So.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to end it with a musical one too. I'm hoping that Steven Tyler goes on tour with Aerosmith, even if it's limited after the Back to the Beginning performance.
Right.
So one for the old guys.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you, and join us next month on the next show.
Thank you.
Thank you.